Well, thanks for joining me today for just a conversation to connect and just cross-pollinate and sharing ideas of healing and what co-creation kind of means for you. I'd love to give just a brief introduction for Troy. Troy has spent his life building community and studying human connection, in addition to coaching people who want more inner peace, vitality, and purpose. He also produces private invitation-only transformational parties, retreats, and festivals. Troy has co-founded Students for Sensible Drug Policy, the ArcView Group, which is one of the first and largest consortium of cannabis investors, Canopy Boulder, which is one of the first accelerators in the cannabis sector, and Burner Map, one of the largest social networks of Burning Man participants. He also served in leadership roles at MAPS and the Marijuana Policy Project. Yeah, thank you for joining me today. Is there anything that you would like, anything you would like to kind of add on or ways that you would like to introduce yourself today?
Yeah, I mean, that's lovely. I mean, I think I spent the first, bunch of my adulthood working to get people out of jail, like, all these people who are being punished and deprived of liberty for what they put in their bodies. And somewhere along the way, I kind of realized that even though that's important to change those laws, that I discovered that there were actually people who were free in prison, and the vast majority of people outside of prison were not. And the thing about the people outside prison that are not is that the keys are just sitting right there, right? So this is kind of like, I was always fascinated by the personal growth aspect of things, but I started to shift my attention more to the prisons that we put ourselves in instead of the prisons that, the government puts people in. And I would say I still care about that, but just my focus has evolved.
Right. Yeah, and as someone that has experienced first-handedly some of these events that you put on, retreats, I mean, they're nothing like anything else that I've experienced. There's so much sense of intentionality, felt sense of belonging and community. And as someone who identifies with being autistic, I found that there's a layer of unmasking for myself. And when I have left these spaces, rather than feeling drained, I walk away with deeper connections with others and within myself too. Which I think sometimes events in the Bay Area can feel a lot like networking and having like your elevator speech ready. Yeah. But I've found that there's a disarming when I have come into these spaces that has just been so healing and connecting and restorative. And I'm curious, within your career that weaves activism, entrepreneurship, spirituality, and community, how did you begin all of this, and how is this a continuing shaping practice for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like just innate. I think I've always been doing it, but I wasn't doing it on purpose until more recently, right? In other words, I look back at my life and I realized that I did the morning announcements from the time I was in, 7th grade till I graduated high school. So like every single morning I was on the speaker, and I was putting together lip sync contests and all kinds of different events and things like that as president of the student government. And, I won class spirited I went to my 30-year high school reunion, and I was class spirited. I put the 30-year reunion together, right? This is just it's in my bones. I don't understand what other people are doing. So in other words, it's just what comes natural. I'm just a convener. And so, but I think, I'm trying to think of, I think Burning Man, was a big, influence for me. I went when I was 23. I'm 48 now. And that kind of opened my mind up to the idea that celebration, playfulness is a serious effort, it's a serious activity. Like this is like, wait a second, this isn't frivolous. This creates bonds and creates this idea of ecstasis, group ecstasis. There's something about play that, gives us a peek beyond our veil of separateness. And so those were the first glimpses, and there were like this aspect of it that was like, wow, okay, interesting. And so then I got more involved in things and did more kind of personal growth based things and got involved in more community kinds of stuff. And then I started hosting things that were all about alternative lifestyle and alternative ways of being and relating with each other, that all of a sudden people kept saying, oh, you're going to host that thing again? Oh, that was amazing. This was the best thing I've ever been to. And I was like, oh, really? Interesting. Okay, well, let's do it on purpose next time.
Yeah.
And then through that, I just became a real student of connection and a student of, wow, what is it that's working about this container? And realizing that, yes, it's about choosing the right people, but more than choosing the right people, it's really, we are creatures of our environment. And so if we create a culture and a certain kind of environment, then we can expect a certain kind of output from people. And that's just what we're constantly perfecting. We do a lot with feedback. We try and really, what worked, what didn't, how do we dial this in?
Right, right. You spoke about like playfulness and joy as being inspiration, and I'm curious too, how do you find it to also be a form of like resistance and like political activism too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Our culture sucks. It's terrible. It's boring. And that disconnection that is inherent in the way that we are all expected to relate with each other is half the reason why people are obsessed with material things, right? It's half the reason why people go down, political rabbit holes. And, if you think about all these people in the world that are, fucking shit up, from all parts of the political spectrum, gotta ask, like, are their community needs being met? Like, are they, like, how are they, where does their connection come from? Can they see that we're all one? Those kinds of things. And I think if we had a different culture around connection, and we didn't put so many eggs in the romantic relationship basket, and we put more eggs in the community basket, and we used community to learn new skills of relating and perspective taking, that this would take the edge off of all of this. And even if it doesn't, there is this idea that within a sea of chaos, there is always islands of coherence. And I think as the world continues to disintegrate, these islands of coherence become more and more important. And it's true that may seem like you're escaping the mayhem of the world, but actually what we know from physics is that these islands of coherence, if we put energy into them, they ultimately make it possible. It's the only thing that could make the chaos stop. You can't stop the chaos by fighting it. You have to build alternatives that impact it. And I think these spaces really do that. And they might look frivolous, right? It might look like people's just in celebration, but it's not. We're also really not only is that important, but we're also like bringing in a lot of vulnerability and a lot of space for grief and a lot of, space to welcome the whole self, right? So you don't have to put on a fake front in
Right.
order to belong.
Right.
Um, and so I think that's a really important thing to make sure that the celebration that happens
Mm.
isn't celebration that says, well, I'm supposed to be happy right now, but
Right.
rather is born out of authentic, catching the wave.
Right. There's in our clinic we have this saying, like when we're working with shoulds, like you're shitting all over yourself.
Yeah.
And there's such a richness to what you're speaking about where there's an invitation of wholeness and within that like a diversity. Like islands have some of the most richest biodiversity there.
Hmm.
And I love what you're sharing around it's not necessarily a way of numbing, but a real true like homecoming. And that's why
Hmm.
like they seem so I don't know, not extravagant, but there's excitement. There's like this like, whoa, I'm tapping into something. There's like a realness within me. There's a realness within you, and it's exciting. And so much
Yeah.
beauty, like, I think breakthrough can happen because there's like authenticity that's there and visibility where difference is like being celebrated. And there's a like ways in which I think people are brought in that breaks through the fakeness. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm curious, like,
Yeah, well, you bring up a good point about how people are brought in, right? There is something, I mean, there's an interesting dance between inclusion and exclusion, right? It turns out that in order to create a truly inclusive space where you're really feeling like a sense of like I belong,
mm,
um, and people are accepted for who they are, ironically, there's a lot of exclusion that goes into making that possible, right? In other words, in order for an event or a community to feel special, it needs to be exclusionary in certain ways, right? For my events, you have to know me or somebody who has been a long time participant.
mm,
Um, and that's the entry point. And then we're like, hey, we're looking for people who are open hearted, well attuned to others, and not super conflict prone / victimy oriented. And if people run through that filter and say, yeah, this person, and there's also excited about what we're doing,
mm,
uh, and that filter has really worked to keep the culture really rich. And then also, there's this saying, you can't make old friends,
mm,
and there is something to the trial and error of this that makes it great, but it's beyond just the trial and error. It's actually the many years of relationship building. I mean, there's a party I've been throwing now for 10 years.
mm,
Um, and there are people there that have been going all 10 years, right? So the culture has built. Like this has become an institution. So there's like the the ball is rolling down the hill, people kind of catch the wave, right? I don't have to make the wave every year. The wave is already there. People show up with their A game,
mhm.
with their loving A game, and so anyway, there's just you can't make old friends.
Can't make old friends, right? I'm curious too, in how you might have a like your perspective is so I don't know, just really unique. And I'd be curious about your perspective on like community accountability and like the responsibility to like repair, or how do you kind of hold those conversations when like ruptures happen within community?
Yeah, yeah. Um, well, I think that first of all, we do a lot with feedback, right? Well, first of all, there's a lot on the front end where we ask people, we have a whole relational agreements that people
Mm,
go through. So the first step is choosing people who are a good fit for what we're doing, that have the kind of like, oh, this is somebody who's, like that they're vouched for by whoever invites them. So that's step one. Second step is we have all these relational agreements that we have people fill out on the way in, that, say things about like how you're going to orient to consent and how you're going to bring you're there to contribute, not just to take from the community. And part of it in there is that if somebody has an issue with me or feels wronged by me, or there's something crunchy, that I agree to make myself available to really listen to whatever it is that they have to say, and commit to repair. And then vice versa. If you feel like somebody has been, that you feel wronged, that you also agree to commit to repair, right? Because that's a two-way street. And then, and then the other thing we do is we always talk about, consent a little bit in the opening, but not just the basic consent of like ask before you, touch or whatever. It's beyond that. It's about like, how do you attune to the person you're being with to ensure that they're enjoying whatever it is that you're doing, you're talking or anything. And then on the flip side, how do we make clear what our wants and not wants are, right? So like it's also the responsibility of those being approached to be clear. And so we build a real two-way street, and that really helps. And then if there's a problem, we have this form that people can fill out that we're asking for all this feedback, including, do you feel like anybody didn't embody the spirit that we, hope to, and what do you hope that be done about it, right? And then we have people on our team who can field those. I try to not do that because I can be kind of conflicted in a lot of ways. And so I get involved where necessary, but generally, we kind of talk it through. And if it's beyond what we can do, we'll refer them out, to other things. And also here's the beauty of it being a invitation only kind of a thing, which is that like, we can not invite somebody or invite somebody for any reason. We don't need a reason, right? Like it's an invite only event, right? I make a new list every time based on who we want there, right? And so, it's not like there needs to be a judge and jury, for anything, that comes up. But I have to say that's really minimal. We also have care, but we also have people on that, like, there to help with emotional dysregulation. But I gotta say, in most of our events, they're not doing much. They're not really getting much action, and we have very, very few, very, very few issues with that. But sometimes when they do come up, they can really suck some time and energy for sure.
No, there's like an anticipation of like people are human and we're going to be messy, and like that must be okay. And there's a safety to them too, where it's like, rather than it being like a cancel culture, right? When we're talking about culture, there's like a leaning into one another, and how like that can be a point in rather than a turning point out. To see it continuing to grow as it has.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to be clear, like, it really depends. If somebody's been part of our community for many, many years and then there's a challenge with them, then we're much more likely to lean in. But if somebody like was just invited to something and they kind of shit the bed on their first time, like, I'm not leaning in with that person. I'm just like, I don't have time for that. Like, they give them the feedback and keep on moving, right? And so it's not that I just want to be real about that. That's just not realistic. That we're not a social service agency. we throw events. We build community. But that's an important question. What is community, right? And I think a lot of people like to think of community as like a membership organization where there's like structure and you're either in the community or you're out of the community. And I don't think of it that way. I think people that do that get themselves bogged down in all kinds of things. I don't have an organization. You're not a member of any of my things, right? Different things are going to appeal to different people, and there's a different audience we're inviting to things. But community builds because of the fact that you show up and you see a lot of people that you know, and and you build relationships. So each person really has their own community. So it's really a bit of a misnomer to, it's really just a shortcut to say that it's this community and that community, because there are certain signatures, but the community is not a legal a legal or structural term of art. It's kind of like a flocking, a term of sort of flocking. It's not, there's no hard edges.
Right, right. I'm curious for you, working both within community and individual work for people too, how do you see these two systems like feeding into each other, or are they two separate
Yeah.
paths, or are they like intertwined with one another?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that can happen with these kinds of experiences, especially for people whose daily life is so wildly different than what they're experiencing in these, you know, containers where there's a different culture that kind of reigns the day. It's like there's the culture externally, but then there's the culture in our minds,
Mm-hmm.
and the culture that we live in. And so I think people can have these truly expansive experiences where they really see what's possible for them and their community, and how it's possible to be met, and how possible it is to meet. And then they come back into their regular life and they're like, okay, but how do I implement that? How do I integrate that? And so I think that is the birthplace for me of the one-on-one work. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and um, but I will say, I think we are over. I don't think the real magic happens one-on-one. I really think one-on-one work is great, and I think it can really be the deciding factor for a lot of things. But I think that our wounds are built, we're born in community. I think that there's so much more alchemy. There's so much more scale, um, and there's so much more mystical kind of magic that can happen in a group than can happen um, one-on-one. I know that for me personally, yes, I work with one-on-one practitioners when I'm working on something, but most of my biggest breakthroughs have come in groups, not one-on-one.
Yeah. Yeah. Same. I think that there's like an acceleration, and like when there's an internal feeling, there's something within the somatics too of seeing yourself within another person that can make
Mm-hmm.
you feeling more embodied. Or if you haven't quite yet found like the words for expression, like hearing someone be like able to say something and for it to like resonate, or to see someone kind of display their authenticity, it can create some like inspiration for you to like internalize it, to myceliate it, and like let it come out like you're speaking about. Yeah. And so for these group settings, I'm curious more if you wanted to speak upon, like, if someone is struggling with like feeling brave or wanting to kind of, or feeling shy, how you might like worked with that, or if someone, I know like myself, I've been really shy or nervous. What has like left you feeling like awe-inspired with like seeing someone being like from that
Oh,
state too?
oh my God, this is what I live for. I mean, it's just like there is a magic, there's an alchemy, because I think underneath it all, we all want to feel open and free, and we want our gifts to be shared confidently, and we want to receive people without a lot of um, gunk in the line. um, and so 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 it's really about being able to see people go through that, and of course the people who show up the tightest, but who were drawn to this, and someone said, oh no, that person's open hearted, that person really wants, like it can be overwhelming to be around people who are so free. um and so we do a lot of saying, hey, however you are is exactly where you're supposed to be, right? Don't compare, don't you don't want to be comparing yourself to to others, and like, however you are is good. And I think things like having the grieving spots and having the introvert spots and just things like, even if nobody goes there, there's something about knowing that that's there, that says, okay, the part of me that's feeling antisocial is also welcome here, because there's some sort of structural acknowledgement of it.
Mhm.
And then I think the other thing that we do that really kind of like helps with that is we always bring everybody together for an opening.
Mhm.
And we breathe together, and we remind ourselves of the why we're here, um, and the ground rules and those kinds of things. And then we get up and we do a connection experience, where we look in each other's eyes, where we get to see beyond the limitations of our separateness, and start to see how people who are really different than us are a lot like us, and that the ways that we're different is also very exciting. And this modulates the entire group nervous system. And it changes how people make eye contact with each other. So even the people that weren't in there, it changes. If enough people do it, it changes the culture.
Right.
And people are like, why is everybody so nice? It's because everybody's nervous systems were brought into coherence with each other. That's why it's not even conceptual. It's totally a somatic experience. And if you do this in a fun way, so I think one of the reasons why what we do works is partly because I don't sound like most people that do this work. I think most people, there's the people who are like kind of like, ah, and and they're wearing the gown, and they're wearing they got the crystals, and the whole, they speak in a lot of flowery language and stuff. Those people like are great, but they're not the best for reaching a wide audience. And I think what has worked about what I'm doing, and also the people that I bring in to do different things too, is that there's a way of like really honoring the woo, but speaking in a way that is very matter of fact, and even able to make fun of ourselves and stuff. And so that is incredibly disarming to people. People are like, okay, he's not that far out there, but I am really far out. I mean, that's the reality, right? But I can bring people along the bridge. And so that's what I look for in the people that I bring into things is, can you bring people across the bridge in a way that feels good to their nervous system?
Right.
And so anyway, that's kind of, but yes, so many times, oh my God, I can tell you a million stories of people who showed up like a deer in headlights and left like the freest humans on earth. We've got pages and pages of testimonials of people like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like why one of the oldest professions, I mean there's so many, but like the jester working in the royal court is
Yes.
because like it was a way to connect people outside of the castle to the people that are inside and reach this wideness, and laughter just disarms people, and joy,
Totally.
playfulness, and it reaches, like you just said, like a wide audience. When you can play, you can laugh. It's like you can hear more, and there's so much like breathing too. When you're laughing, you're really connecting with the soma of the
Totally.
body and with the community too. um I'm feeling aware of time, and I'm curious
Yeah.
if you have time for one more question.
Yeah. I've got time for 5 or 10 more minutes. Sure.
Okay, cool. I wanted to just bring in some of the work around the movement building around like cannabis, psychedelics, and harm reduction. And when kind of like this framework of like opening the stigma, how do you find the stigma opening within these communities that you've served? Or how would you like the stigma to continue to be opening for some of these topics?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's really great. I mean, people are just, I mean, obviously part of these experiences. Psychedelics can be such a valuable tool, if used, responsibly, um, in this endeavor of unfurling. Right? We're all tight. We all want to unfurl. And I think psychedelics can be amazingly helpful in um, in helping that process of, you know, reclaiming our birthright
Mhm.
as joyful, fully feeling creatures.
Right.
Uh, and So it's beautiful to watch that. And and I think that, and it's also beautiful that, like, you know, not everybody does that, right? Like, you know, we're told, you know, it's like, you know, we have somebody does a sober curious thing at all of our events, right? Where they'll gather the people who are either sober or sober curious, right? Anybody who's like, you know, so we're not like saying, oh, these are wonderful. It's like everybody's going to have a different relationship with these things.
Mm.
How do we create a space where whatever, we don't have, like, same thing with, you know, polyamory or sexuality. It's like these things aren't good. It's just that there's space for those that are, they're not good or bad. They're tools that
Mm.
can be used well or not well, depending on our relationship with them. But the more we can be tuned in, and the more coherent the relational field can be,
Mhm.
um, and the more regulated our nervous systems are, the more of these powerful tools
Mhm.
we can um, digest
Right.
in a way that works really well.
Right. Right. And it seems like it really puts you in the present moment too, because what was once maybe medicine could be like harmful at a certain time. That's why things kind of come in and out. But if you're really attuned with yourself or within these spaces, then it seems like there's more healing that can come from it and authenticity of what's true for right now. And that now I think can continue to change as we do too.
Totally, totally.
As we begin to close, I just like want to thank you for your depth and
Yeah,
honesty
thanks
that you
for.
brought today. And is there anything else that you would like to share, or upcoming events or things that you're putting on that you would like to highlight?
Everything I do is private, so I only invite people I know, and I don't know who's hearing this. So, um, unfortunately, slash kind of interestingly, I have nothing to sell. um, um, but I, um, yeah, I'm glad that you care about this, and I'm glad that you're, you know, devoting your life to, you know, building a better culture where people feel more alive and free and like they belong. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to have this conversation, and and we've got to spread this. You know, I mean, this just has to be. My big goal is to create a grant giving organization and a training organization that gives grants to people building open hearted culture, because the big problem for most people doing this is that the economics don't make sense. And so people either need to have savings or big donors or whatever in order for this to make sense, because you're always faced with a challenge, which is,
Mm.
in order to make it make sense financially, you have to massively increase the numbers at a pace that is faster than the culture can build organically.
Mhm.
And that can ruin the early days, you know, and that ruins the culture. Or you can't pay people decently to help you out, and then you have an unbalanced thing, because then, you know, you've got one class of people feeling taken advantage of to help another class of people, right? That's not good either. Or you have to reduce the quality of your offering,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
Because you can't afford to, you know, hire the right people or bring the right people in or have the right coordination to be able to deliver the experience, to be able to deliver a true masterpiece to people. And so
Mhm.
then that hurts the ability to create the culture. And so anyway, I just think that as we realize that connection and building a new culture is the crux of what can save us,
Mhm.
that we start seeing it as a legitimate target for philanthropic dollars.
Yeah.
Um, and not just from people who are going to go to that event. Not like, oh, I'm rich and I get to go to this event, so I'm going to give some extra money to support it. That's great. But no, I mean someone thinking about it from a much bigger level of like, okay, how do we give grants? How do we funnel money to something that makes this possible? Because everyone wants to give something to something big, but the problem is that's not how community builds. It builds small. But we can build small at scale through grants, through different means of empowering people at the local level to build the kinds of group coherence that they feel most called to, and share ideas amongst each other for that. So anyway,
Yeah.
that's sort of the big dream,
Mhm.
is seeing this as a like this should be getting as much money as I don't know, anything else anyone's contributing to.
Right. Yeah. And it makes it more self-sustaining too within the longevity of creating community. And it's
Yeah,
not something just overnight, but something that's built within practice, within time, and patience too.
yeah, yeah, totally. Well, and I hope to see you at the next thing.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much. I
Thank you,
appreciate your
Corey.
time.